As we prepare for the word preached, would you join with me your hearts and minds in prayer? Oh God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of each of our hearts be found acceptable in your sight. For you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. We begin this morning with a little Bible lesson. Take a look at your scripture printed in your bulletin. Luke 15, 1 through 10 lists two stories of being lost. Lost sheep, lost coin. These two stories are part of a pericope. That's a Greek word. It's a Greek word that means a set of stories that are supposed to hang together. Does anybody know, anybody who was not here on Tuesday night, does anybody know what the rest of the pericope is? Where else do we hear about ones who are lost? The what? The prodigal son. Gene Ward wins a prize. Exactly. Your prize is grace, by the way, but we all get that anyway, so yay. Right, Luke is the only place where we find that story, and that's what's in this pericope. The story of the prodigal son. It's also sometimes called the story of the man with two sons. And we know how the story goes, doesn't it? Don't we? There was a man, he had two sons. One day, the younger son came to him and said, "Father, give me all of my inheritance. I want it now." The father says, "Okay." He gives him the inheritance, and the text says he goes off to a distant land, and there he indulges in life. He spends all of his money, and he finds himself working with the pigs. He finds himself actually eating what the pigs are eating. And that's the point at which he says, "You know what? My dad's servants eat better than I do right now. I've made a mistake. Clearly, I need to go home, ask for forgiveness, and ask if my father will hire me on as a hired hand, because I'll get to eat better than I am now." So that's what he does. He starts down that long road towards home. And before he even gets there, while he's still back here in the distance, his father sees him. And he runs towards him. He runs towards him and he takes him in his arms. And he declares, "The one that was lost is now found. Go and get the best robe. Go and get rings for his fingers. Somebody kill the fatted calf. We are going to have a party because my son, who was as good as dead, he's alive again." He is alive again. Meanwhile, the older brother, remember this is a father who has two sons, right? Meanwhile, the older brother, who's never left his father's side, who has been dutiful and good and worked, is out working in the field. A servant comes out to tell him, "Your brother has come back. Come in from the fields. We're going to have a party." And what does the older brother do? He does this. He pouts and he sulks and he says, "He gets to have a party? Dad's never even given me a little bit of cash to have a party with my friends. I'm not going in." And so the father comes out of the house and goes out to the field and comes to his son and says, "You've always had everything that I have. This one hasn't. He was good as dead, and now he's found. Come in. Come in and join the party." We all know this story really well. I think so many of us in this room could have gotten up and told this story this morning. But what happens so often is we do exactly what we did in the bulletin today. We divide it from the rest of the pericope. So we tell the story of the lost sheep, maybe all on its own. Maybe we tell the story of the lost coin, and we definitely don't tell those with the story of these two brothers. And of course, the prodigal son is it's a popular one, right? That story gets told over and over and over again. And what happens then is we think that there's one way to be lost. Think about the way we refer to that story, the prodigal son. Apparently, there's only one way to be lost. It's to be a prodigal. Now, in all fairness, when you are a prodigal, you are lost. I know prodigals. I've been a prodigal myself. Some of you know what it's like to be prodigals. To say, I'm done with you. And to leave and to go out and to try and do it on your own in your own way, and you get in over your head and suddenly you find you're eating pig slop or worse. You hit absolute rock bottom and you realize you have got to go get some help or you're not going to make it. That's who prodigals are. They're the ones who figure out they need help or they're not going to make it. There are lots of ways to be lost. There are lots of ways to be lost because the prodigal son is not the only one who's lost in the story. This older brother, the dutiful one, the one who has stayed and worked by his father's side all of these years, as soon as his younger brother came home, he got lost all the same. Did you notice? He goes out and sulks. He doesn't want to have anything to do with the celebration. And the father has to come out and say, "Lost one, come in." There are lots of ways to be lost. You can be lost even having never left home. But we find also in the pericope that there are lots more ways to be lost. You could be the lost sheep. But let's think about that for a second. Sheep are not lost because they've decided to be a prodigal. Sheep just wander away. It's not that sheep have been bad. Oh, I know. It was so bad, wasn't it, Michael? I know. I just couldn't resist. But that's the thing. If we only focus on the story of the prodigal and his brother, then we only ever attach being bad to being lost. And there are lots of ways to be lost. The lost sheep is lost because it's wandered away. Or maybe, particularly on this Pride Sunday, maybe we need to name the fact that maybe lost sheep leave the flock because it's the only way they're going to survive. Because the flock has been bad. Because the flock has not been good to them. Because the flock has said, "We like you, but you need to change." And the sheep says, "I have to get out of here. I have to go find something that's going to feed me, or I'm going to have the life sucked out of me here in the midst of this flock." Yes, there are lots of ways to be lost. Or maybe you're a lost coin. Do coins wander away? No. Do coins leave because they're bad coins? No. Coins just get lost in the shuffle. Have you gotten lost in the shuffle? I mean, I know that there are lots of people who, when they're 4 years old, they wake up and they know what they want to do with the rest of their life, and they make that happen. But most of us end up being lost coins at one point or another. And what is true? Whether you're a prodigal or a sulking older brother, whether you're a lost sheep or a lost coin, what is true is that God will come and find you. In fact, what is more true than that is that God has never left your side. All we have to do is be like Dorothy and turn around and realize we've been in the midst of the kingdom the whole time. And when that happens, there is rejoicing. There is so much rejoicing. I want to leave you today with a story by Tony Campolo. He's this famous preacher. You can Google him. Tony tells the story of going to Honolulu to do a speaking gig. And the thing about going to Honolulu to do a speaking gig when you live on the East Coast is you wake up at 3 in the morning and you're starving. So he woke up at 3 in the morning, starving. He went downstairs and around the corner to a Greasy Spoon diner. Walks in, sits down at the lunch counter. There are no tables or bar stools. There's just a lunch counter. This big guy wanders out from the kitchen and says, "What do you want?" Opens up his pad. Tony says, "I'll have a cup of coffee and a donut." So Harry, that's the name of the waiter / short order cook, goes and pours him a cup of coffee. And then he takes his hand and he wipes it on his apron that has like 3 decades of Greasy Spoon grease on it. And then he picks up a donut and he hands it to him. So there Tony Campolo sits in Honolulu at a lunch counter at 3 in the morning, eating his greasy donut and drinking his coffee. At 3:30, the doors open and 9 prostitutes walk in and they sit down at the lunch counter. So there is Reverend Tony Campolo surrounded by prostitutes. They're talking past him and around him and through him. The prostitute on his right leans around and says to her friend over here, "Hey, you know what? Tomorrow is my birthday. Tomorrow's my birthday. I'm going to be 39 years old. It's my birthday." And her friend over here says, "So, what do you want me to do about it, huh? Do you want me to buy you a cake or, throw you a party?" And the woman over here says, "You don't have to be mean about it. I was just saying, tomorrow's my birthday, that's all." And then she stops and she says, "I've never had a birthday party." These prostitutes finish their meal and they leave. Tony Campolo calls Harry, the short order cook, over and he says, "Harry, do they come in every night?" He says, "Yeah, they come in every morning, 3:30 on the dot." Tony Campolo says to him, "I want to throw her a birthday party tomorrow morning. Can I do that here?" Harry grabs his shoulders, looks at him, and says, "Campolo, that's the best idea I've ever heard. Kay, come on out here. Campolo here, he's going to throw Agnes a birthday party." Kay, his wife, who works in the kitchen, comes out and she says, "Oh, I think that's the best idea. Agnes, she's got such a good heart. I know what she does for a living, but she's one of the good ones. Yeah, let's throw her a party." Tony Campolo says, I'm going to buy some decorations, I'm going to make a banner, I'm going to buy a cake. And Harry says, no, leave the cake to me. He agrees. He agrees. So they go away. About 2 o'clock the next morning, Tony Campolo comes back to the diner. He has streamers he's bought at Kmart. He's made a big sign that says, "Happy birthday, Agnes." And they've baked a cake. Around 10 after 3, people start arriving because Kay started telling people what was happening. So by about 25 after 3, every single prostitute in Honolulu is in this diner, and they are ready for Agnes and her friends to come in. Tony has everybody prepped, And at 3:30 in the morning, on the dot, Agnes and her friends walk in, and everybody says, happy birthday to you. They all burst out in a song. And you have never seen someone who is as stunned as Agnes is. She is blown away. They have her sit down. Harry brings out her cake. Blow out your candles, Agnes. And she does. And then somebody hands her the knife and they say, Agnes, cut your cake. She sits there for the longest time, holding that knife and staring at her cake. And finally, she looks up at Tony Campolo and she says, do I have to cut the cake? And he says, no, it's your cake. You can do whatever you want to with it. She says, I don't want to cut the cake. I want to take it to show my mother. And he says, yeah, of course you can do that. So Agnes stands up and she starts to get the cake. And he says, now? You're going to go now? She says, I live 2 blocks down. I'll be right back, I promise. I want to come back and enjoy my party, but I just want my mom to see my cake. She picks it up like it was a baby. She picks it up like it's the Holy Grail. And carefully, she takes it out of the diner and down the street. And the 30 prostitutes and Tony Campolo are left in the diner. There is an awkward silence. At which point, Tony Campolo, who had told people he was a sociologist, says, why don't we pray? Right, because when there's an awkward silence, that's the thing that really makes it better, right? But everybody agreed. And so they all held hands, and Tony Campolo prayed, and he prayed with this fervor that Agnes would be able to live into this abundant life that she has been given, and that she would be delivered from everything that people, particularly men, had ever done to her. That she would be delivered from the abuse that she had experienced, because most prostitutes, they were sexually abused as children. That's how they end up finding their way to sex work. It's just what happens, and he prays for her to be delivered. And when he gets done, Harry looks at him and says, Campolo, you told us you were a sociologist. You're no sociologist. You're a preacher. And he says, you're right. I'm a preacher. At that point, Harry says, well, what kind of church are you a preacher of? Because what kind of church? And Tony Campolo says, in a moment of honest brilliance, he says, I'm the pastor of the kind of church that throws birthday parties for prostitutes. And Harry says to him, no, you're not, because if that kind of church existed, I'd be a member. And isn't that the truth? That's the kind of church where we would all be members. Because Jesus did not come to establish some kind of faith community that resembled a country club. No, do you remember what happens at the beginning of the pericope? He was eating with tax collectors and sinners. He was eating with the people on the margins. That's the kind of church that Jesus came to be part of. And so it doesn't matter why you're on the margins. It doesn't matter if you're a prostitute in Honolulu, or if you're somebody who's been divorced and so you've been ostracized. It doesn't matter if you're somebody who doesn't feel like they have all the answers to faith and so you've been excluded from communities. It doesn't matter if you're gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgendered. It doesn't matter why you've been on the margin. Jesus invites all of us in. And we need to be the kind of church that throws parties for everybody. We need to be the kind of church that prays for the people who have come out of the closet and on the shadow side, who goes and finds the people who are still in and lets them know that there is safe space for them in this world. We don't have a birthday cake today. We have really simple things, bread and grape juice and a little bit of wine. But this is the party that God has thrown for us. We remember throughout Jesus' ministry that he ate with people all the time. It didn't just happen in that upper room. It happened all the time. He ate with anybody who would sit down with him, and he got in trouble for it. And on the last time that he ate with people, with those 12 guys who were his disciples, but we can safely assume that there were women and children there too, because there were constantly women who were part of his ministry. They gathered for the Passover feast, the feast that reminds us in all the ways that God saves. And he took the leftover bread, and he blessed it, and he broke it, saying, "This is my body, which is broken for you. Take and eat, and remember me." And maybe when we remember Jesus, then we won't be so dismembered as a body, right? And in the same way, he took that cup of ordinary table wine and in pouring it out made the ordinary extraordinary, saying, "This is the new covenant. It's shed for you and for many. Bless it. Take and drink and remember me." And so, Holy One who invites us to this feast, we ask that you would bless these simple gifts and bless our simple lives. And in the eating of these ordinary things, that you would take our ordinary lives and transform them into extraordinary, extraordinary lives for your glory. God, bless what we are about to do. We're going to commune today by the intinction method. It's a fancy church word for dip, not sip. So you will come forward via the center aisle. I will be here with bread. Receive the bread. There's also gluten-free bread here, and there's a gluten-free, this is gluten-free, free to dip in. But after you receive your bread, you'll go to either side. Ruth will be over here, and Tom Wattenbach will be over here. There is grape juice in the stoneware chalice, and there is wine in the glass-topped wine goblet chalice. I will ask Elaine if you could come up and just dismiss people by rows. As I said at the beginning of worship, this is not the table of Community United Church of Christ, nor is it the table of the United Church of Christ. This is God's table, where there's room for everyone. So friends, come. These are the gifts of God for you, the people of God. Come. All things have been made ready.